This is Amud Yomi Gemara and Shabbos Daf. Pei Hey Amud Aleph. We're holding in the very bottom of Pei Dalam and Beis. We just finished learning a Mishnah, and the Mishnah taught us that if I have a patch, a garden that is 6 tefachim by 6 tefachim, we spoke it's approximately 3 feet by 3 feet. You could plant 5 minim, one on every side, and a fifth smack in the center. The pasuk, the Mishnah quoted, "Kikaret tzitzi simcha, kikana zerueha." Tatzmiach comes along the Gemara right away, and the Gemara says, "From where in this pasuk do you learn your Mekar? Ma'im mashma. From where do you see that you can put 5 different minim in this one garden? Amar Rav Yehuda kikaretz tzitzi simcha. Says Rav Yehuda, we learn out from the pasuk that says the earth it gives forth its vegetation, which we see over here. Each word, as the Gemara now will explain, is teaching that there be a different min. Toitzi is chad. Simcha is chad. Hare trey, that's 2 different minim. Zeruel is trey. Now you take 2 and you say it's of those 2, so it's another 2, is 4. Ha'arba, tatzmiach is chad or chamisha. Therefore, you see in this pasuk that there can be 5 different minim planted in one area, thereby indicating that you have your garden patch with the 5 minim like the Mishnah taught. V'kim lehuler rabbanan, as we turn over to Pehei Amid Aleph. V'kim lehuler rabbanan dechamsha b'shita lo yanki me'adodi. Say Chazal, the 5 different species within 6 different, in a 6 tefach area are not yoinik, are not nourished one from another. Says the Gemara, min alandal kim lehuler rabbanan milsahi. How do we know that Kim Lula Rabbanon? The Rabbanon, no. Shkayach. What does that mean? What's the makar to that? Explains the Gemara. My dirsiv. Where do we find the pasuk? Do not make a boundary of your neighbor, which the early ones already marked off. Says the Gemara, we learn from this pasuk that the gevol, the boundary that the early ones created, do not encroach, do not bring one to another. So again, what do we see from there? My gevol rishayim, says the Gemara, what do you see from this pasuk? So Amar Reb Shmuel Bar Nachmani Amar Rav Yonasan, says Reb Shmuel from the Yonasan Dersiv, says the pasuk 6 lines down. The first one line is Dirsiv. Eila b'nei Seir hachayri yoshvei aretz. These are the children of Seir, those who live in the land. Now, why does the pasuk say that the b'nei Seir, the chayri that lives in the land, atu kuli alma yoshvei rakianinu shkayach, they live ba'aretz, and where does everyone else live? Everyone else lives in the Shamayim? Of course not. That's ridiculous. Ella explains Rav Yonasan, Rav Shmuel Bar Nachmani Amar Rav Yonasan, that these people were bikiyin. These were bikiyin in the living of the land. What does that mean? They would say, the length of a rod is best for zaitim, olives. This area is like fanim. So that's 3 different items. Now, why are they called the chayri? Shamarichan es aretz, because they would smell the ground, and they would know from the smell, the scent of the earth, what type of item should and could be planted in that area. The chivi, and they're also called chivi, the pasuk says. Amar Papa, sheyataya min es aretz kechivya. Like a snake, they're even actually able to taste the soil and know you could grow there. So says the Gemara, that's where we see that Kavol Rishainim Loisasig, that once there was something marked off, you should not change it. And from there, we have a Kimlul Rabbanan, that in the 6 Tevach area, you could plant 5 different minim. You know why they're called Churi? Because they were freed from their property, they were driven from the land. Continues the Gemara with another Makar. Once we see one pasuk for the din of the Mishnah, the Gemara comes along to teach us a little bit more of the exact measurements of this area that you're allowed to put in the 5 different items. Omar Reb Asi, comes along Reb Asi and he teaches Aruga. When we have a patch, we have a patch which it's toicha, the inside. Of course, every time you measure something, you got to know you're measuring the external area or you're measuring the internal area. Says Ravasi, anytime you have a patch that the internal area is shisha, is 6 tfachim, chotz megvulel, not including the boundaries, we're 8 lines to the bottom. First one in line is teicha. That's the area that you could plant these 5 different minim. Tanami hachi, a brisa that concurs, aruga teicha shisha enables one to plant the 5 different minim around it. Says the Gemara, gvuleha bekama. How wide are the gevulim in order to consider it its own area? That on that gvul, that on that boundary on each side, you can plant its own min. Explains the Gemara, Kititanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, a bit of a complicated Mishnah in Kalayim that says, Rabbi Yehuda Oimer, Reichav Kamali Reichav Pars. The width is the width of the sole of a foot, which is a tefach, explains Rashi. Omer Rabbi Yizir, Rabbi Tim, Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa. My time with Rabbi Yehuda, where does he get that the width has to be the width of your shoe, that it's 1 tefach, that 6 fachim is the boundary? Tchsev says the pasuk, Vishkisa beraglecha kigana yarak. You water it on foot like the vegetable garden. Why does the pasuk say it's watered on foot? Ma regel tefach afa gevul nami tefach. Just as the width of a foot is a tefach, the gevul as well as a tefach. Why? Because when you're walking around the field to water it, you have to have the mount of your foot and able to walk around. And that's where we learn that the gvul has to be at least a tefach. One more line says the Gemara, Amar Rav, Aruga b'chorva sheninu. When the Mishnah taught they could have 5 different minim in this aruga of 6 fachim, says Rav, that's an aruga in an area that has no vegetation. There's nothing around it. However, the problem is going to be, what if there's other areas around this patch? Rav is now going to teach us that the Mishnah is dealing with an isolated aruga. I have a 6 tefach little garden in the middle of nowhere. But now let's say this 6 tefach garden has other gardens around it, then of course we're going to have a bigger problem because we have to be worried by the other fields and the other patches and the other rows that are going to encroach on this one. Says the Gemara, 1 second. But there are the corners. So why can't, even if there are other areas around it, why can't you stagger all the different rows that they won't be near each other? You look at Rashi, in the bottom right corner, Rashi shows you that you have the corners that you could plant upon. If you do opposite corners and the opposite corners on the opposite fields, nothing will be near each other. Amri Rav Mishmi the Rav. We're talking about a case where you're planting not just a corner, the whole area, and that's when it won't work when there are fields surrounding it. Says the Gemara, 1 second, listen, but let him plant on the outside and not fill up the inside. Why does Rav say that it's only an isolated field? The Gemara is asking, there are other ways of getting that you could have multiple patches within the 6 tefach field. Answers the Gemara as we turn over to Rabbeis. You're right. Be'etzem you could. That you might not listen, you might end up planting all around, and therefore we don't allow you to do it if there's any fields around it, says Rav. Says the Gemara, which should be no different than a roish tur, then the corner of a vegetable field. Milo Tanad, do not learn in the Mishnah, roish tur, yarak nichlas tuchsader acher, motor. Why? So why is it any different? It explains the Gemara, in roish tur ba'aruga, that's only a special din of the roish tur by yarak. When it comes to aruga, there's no such thing, and that's where Rav gets his din, that the din in the Mishnah, that a 6 tefach patch will allow us to grow 5 different items. It's only going to be when there's no other fields around it. We'll pick up from here, B'siyata Dishmaya.